Hey, do you know what time of the year it is? That's right, it's tax season. And if you're like me, you might be feeling a little nervous about filing your taxes for the first time. But don't worry, I'm here to help you out with some tips and tricks on how to file taxes on your own for the first time. Filing taxes for the first time is a big milestone for any young adult. It means you're taking charge of your finances and becoming more independent. But it can also be confusing and overwhelming, especially if you don't know where to start or what to do. That's why I decided to make this video, to share with you my experience and some useful resources that can make your tax filing process easier and smoother. Before we get into the details, let me tell you a little bit about myself and why I decided to file my taxes on my own for the first time. I'm a 22-year-old college student, and I work part-time as a tutor and a freelance writer. Last year, I earned about $15,000 from my various sources of income, and I also received some scholarships and grants for my education. I used to let my parents handle my taxes for me, but this year, I wanted to try it myself and learn more about how taxes work and how they affect me. So, I did some research online and found out that there are 3 main ways to file taxes. Fill out IRS Form 1040 by hand and mail it, not recommended. File taxes online using tax software or hire a human tax preparer to do the work of tax filing. I decided to go with the second option because it seemed the most convenient, affordable, and reliable. There are many free or low-cost online tax software options available, such as TurboTax, H&R Block, IRS Free File, and more. I chose TurboTax because it's one of the most popular and trusted tax software providers, and it has a lot of features and benefits that can help first-time filers like me. One of the first things I had to do before I started filing my taxes online was to gather all of my tax documents. These are the forms and records that show how much income I earned, how much taxes I paid, and what deductions and credits I qualify for. Some of the most common tax documents are 1. W-2. This is the form that your employer sends you to show how much you earned and how much taxes were withheld from your paycheck. If you have more than one employer, you should receive a W-2 from each of them. 2. 1099. This is the form that shows other types of income such as interest, dividends, royalties, self-employment, etc. There are different types of 1099 forms depending on the source and nature of your income. For example, I received a 1099 MISI from my freelance writing clients and a 1099 E&T from my bank account. 3. 1098-T. This is the form that your school sends you to show how much tuition and fees you paid and how much scholarships and grants you received. This form is important for claiming education tax credits and deductions such as the American Opportunity Credit and the tuition and fees deduction. 4. Receipts. These are the proof of your expenses that can lower your taxable income, such as medical bills, charitable donations, business expenses, etc. You should keep track of your receipts throughout the year and organize them by category and date. I collected all of these documents and scanned them to my computer so I could easily access them and upload them to the tax software. I also made sure to have my social security number, bank account information, and email address ready, as these are required for filing and receiving your tax refund. The next thing I had to do was to decide whether my parents can claim me as a dependent on their tax return. This is a very important step because it affects how much taxes I have to pay and what deductions and credits I can claim. A dependent is someone who relies on someone else for financial support, and there are 2 ways your parents can claim you as a dependent: as a qualifying child or as a qualifying relative. To be a qualifying child, you have to meet 4 criteria. Age. You have to be under 19 or under 24 if you're a full-time student at the end of the year. Relationship. You have to be your parents' child, stepchild, foster child, sibling, or a descendant of any of these. Residence. You have to live with your parents for more than half of the year, unless you're away for school, military service, or medical reasons. Support. You have to not provide more than half of your own support, meaning your income, savings, and expenses. To be a qualifying relative, you have to meet 3 criteria. Income. You have to earn less than $4,300 in 2020 or $4,400 in 2021. This amount includes all types of income, such as wages, interest, dividends, etc. Support. Your parents have to provide more than half of your total support, meaning your food, housing, clothing, education, medical care, etc. Not a qualifying child. You have to not be a qualifying child of your parents or anyone else. In my case, I found out that I'm not a qualifying child of my parents because I provided more than half of my own support. I also found out that I'm not a qualifying relative of my parents because I earned more than the income limit. So I concluded that I'm not dependent on my parents and I can claim myself as a dependent on my own tax return. This means that I can get a personal exemption of $4,300, which reduces my taxable income by that amount. After I determined my dependency status, I was ready to start filing my taxes online using TurboTax. I created an account on their website and followed their step-by-step instructions on how to file my taxes. TurboTax asked me a series of simple questions about my personal and financial situation and filled out the appropriate forms and schedules for me. It also checked for any errors or missing information and gave me tips and suggestions on how to maximize my refund and avoid an audit. One of the best features of TurboTax is that it automatically calculates and applies any relevant tax deductions and credits that I qualify for. A tax deduction is an amount that you can subtract from your income before you calculate your taxes, which lowers your tax bill. A tax credit is an amount that you can subtract from your taxes after you calculate them, which reduces your tax liability dollar for dollar. Some of the common tax deductions and credits that TurboTax helped me claim are: standard deduction. This is a fixed amount that you can deduct from your income regardless of your expenses. The standard deduction for 2020 is $12,400 for single filers and $12,550 for 2021. TurboTax automatically applied the standard deduction to my tax return because it was higher than the total of my itemized deductions, which are the specific expenses that you can deduct, such as mortgage interest, state and local taxes, medical expenses, etc. American Opportunity Credit. This is a tax credit that you can claim for the first 4 years of college if you pay for qualified education expenses, such as tuition, fees, books, supplies, and equipment. The credit is worth up to $2,500 per year, and 40% of it is refundable, meaning you can get it even if you don't owe any taxes. TurboTax calculated the amount of the credit based on the information from my Form 1098-T and applied it to my tax return. Earned Income Tax Credit. This is a tax credit that you can claim if you have low to moderate income from working, and you meet certain requirements, such as having a valid Social Security number, being a U.S. citizen or resident, and not being a dependent of someone else. The credit is worth up to $6,660 for 2020 and $6,728 for 2021, depending on your income, filing status, and number of children. The credit is also refundable, meaning you can get it even if you don't owe any taxes. TurboTax determined that I'm eligible for the credit and applied it to my tax return. TurboTax also helped me choose the best way to file and receive my tax return. I decided to file electronically because it's faster, easier, and more secure than mailing a paper return. I also decided to receive my refund by direct deposit because it's the quickest and most convenient way to get my money. TurboTax estimated that I would receive my refund within 21 days of filing, which is much faster than waiting for a check in the mail. After I completed all the steps, TurboTax showed me a summary of my tax return and asked me to review it for accuracy and completeness. I double-checked all the numbers and information and made sure everything was correct. I also signed my tax return electronically, using my prior year adjusted gross income as part of my electronic signature. If you're a first-time filer over the age of 16, you can simply enter 0 as your prior year income for signature purposes. Finally, I submitted my tax return to the IRS and received a confirmation email from TurboTax that my return was accepted. TurboTax also gave me a link to track the status of my refund on the IRS website and notified me when my refund was approved and sent. I was so happy and relieved when I saw the money in, and that's how I filed my taxes for the first time on my own, using TurboTax. I hope this video was helpful and informative for you, and that you learned something new today. Filing taxes for the first time can be a daunting task, but it can also be a rewarding and empowering experience if you have the right tools and resources at your disposal. However, keep in mind that this video is not intended to be professional tax advice, and that every tax situation is different. If you have any doubts or questions about filing your taxes, or if you have a complex tax scenario, I highly recommend that you consult with a certified public accountant, CPA, who can guide you through the process and ensure that you file your taxes correctly and legally.